4 years have passed since little Summer Wells vanished from her family's home on Ben Hill Road. No suspects, no answers, only silence, and a timeline that never quite made sense. But this week, something changed. Investigators quietly returned to the Wells property, not for a public search or a press event, but for a focused re-examination of the land itself. They didn't head to the house. They went to the perimeter, to an old shed at the bottom of the hill near Beach Creek Road. The same area tied to a mysterious 2-hour gap on June 15, 2021, beginning exactly at 4:30 p.m. That was when the workers left, when Ben Hill went silent, and when Summer's trail disappeared forever. What happened in those missing 2 hours? Why now, after years of quiet, has the case come alive again? In this video, we follow the clues, the silence, and the return to the shed. This is Crime Wisp. At first, investigators believed it was a typical missing child case. Search teams combed the woods, dogs traced faint scents, and helicopters scanned the ridges. But even with hundreds of volunteers and miles of terrain covered, nothing appeared. No clothing, no trail, not a single clue that Summer had wandered away. What they did have was a time gap, a 2-hour void between the moment the workers left and the 911 call Candace Bly made at roughly 6:30 p.m. That gap became the heartbeat of the entire mystery. Now, 4 years later, TBI agents have quietly returned. Their focus isn't the home or the woods behind it. It's the property line, specifically a small shed sitting near Beach Creek Road. Locals have seen that shed for years, weathered wood, rusted hinges, half hidden by brush. To most, it's nothing more than storage for tools or paint cans. But to investigators, it may hold the answer to the 4:30 p.m. silence. Sources close to the search say this wasn't a random revisit. The team came prepared, with scanning equipment, soil analysis kits, and marked survey lines running along the lower edge of the property. It wasn't about finding something new, it was about rechecking what might have been missed. The shed sits in a blind zone, too low for the house to see, too far for neighbors to notice. During the initial search, it was reportedly examined only briefly. Dogs passed through the area once, but heavy vegetation and summer heat can distort scent and movement. In East Tennessee, summers, nature hides secrets well. By mid-June, the foliage forms a wall of green. The slope behind the Wells home drops quickly, thick with vines and uneven soil. Even an object placed just a few feet below the line of sight could stay hidden for months. And that's the problem investigators are now revisiting, whether Summer ever left that property at all. The question that drives this new search is deceptively simple. If she didn't leave, where could she have been hidden? The shed is the most logical spot. It's accessible on foot within minutes from the back of the house, yet completely shielded from view. It would have offered just enough cover for someone to conceal evidence in panic, especially during those 2 hours when no one else was around. Investigators now suspect that the quiet between 4:30 and 6:30 wasn't random. It was opportunity. The departure of the workers created what criminal analysts call a low-risk gap, a period where visibility and accountability vanish. If something tragic happened inside the home, that window would have been the only chance to move or hide evidence before police arrived. The new search around the shed is an attempt to answer that haunting possibility. Witnesses recall that when Don Wells arrived home later that evening, he didn't go straight to the house. He drove down toward the bottom of the property, the same direction investigators are focusing on now. At the time, no one questioned it, but viewed through today's lens, it feels significant. Why head there first, unless you already knew that's where attention should be? To law enforcement, the 4:30 window is no longer a theory. It's a timeline built on verifiable movements. The workers clocked out. The noise stopped. The road fell silent. Between that moment and the emergency call, only the Wells family was present. In a rural hollow with no cameras, no passers-by, and no cell tower visibility, 2 hours can change everything. This return to the property is not a media event. It's a correction, a quiet acknowledgement that maybe the first search was too broad, too quick, too confident that the obvious places held the truth. This time, investigators are looking where silence started: the shed, the soil, the shadows beneath the trees. Because sometimes what's overlooked once is exactly where the answers wait. When tragedy strikes a family, panic is expected. Parents run, scream, call for help, tear through the house searching for their child. But what happened on June 15, 2021, doesn't follow that pattern. When police arrived at Ben Hill Road, they didn't find chaos. They found calm. Too calm. Candace Bly appeared quiet, withdrawn, unsure of details. Don Wells, when he returned home, didn't rush to embrace his wife or question what happened. He drove to the lower end of the property, toward the same shed investigators are now re-examining. It's easy to dismiss behavior as shock. But seasoned investigators know there's a difference between grief and control. Don's tone in the hours and days that followed was not that of a frantic father. It was of a man managing perception. His interviews shifted, sometimes contradicting themselves. One day he believed Summer was abducted. Another day he said she wandered off. He spoke of forgiveness, of accepting God's plan, long before there was any reason to believe Summer was gone forever. Then there's Candace. Her version of events changed with each retelling. Gardening, watching YouTube, helping her mother, all offered as fragments of a timeline that never connected cleanly. Between 4:30 and 6:30 p.m., she can't say exactly where she was or what she did. Neither can her mother, Candace Harrer, who was reportedly at the property that day. Together, their recollections form not a picture, but a fog, a cloud of partial truths and missing minutes. To understand why, we have to look at what was happening inside the Wells household before Summer disappeared. At the time, Child Protective Services was investigating the family. There were ongoing concerns about substance abuse, safety, and the condition of the home. If something tragic occurred, a fall, an accident, even a moment of negligence, the decision to call for help would have come with fear. Fear of losing custody, fear of arrest, fear of exposure. Psychologists call this moment defensive survival. It's when the human brain, faced with panic and guilt, stops thinking about morality and starts thinking about consequences. In that state, people don't act rationally. They cover. They delay. They hope the situation will somehow fix itself if they just stay quiet long enough. If Summer had been hurt or killed by accident, it's possible that Candace's first instinct wasn't to dial 911, but to protect what was left of her family. That silence may have become their shield. By creating the idea of an abduction, they gave themselves a narrative, one that turned them from suspects into victims. "She was taken," Don said early on. "We'll see her in heaven." Statements like that aren't just words, they're self-preservation. Once a story like that takes hold, it becomes easier to repeat than to unravel. Over time, you start believing the version that hurts less. Investigators have seen it before. In other missing child cases involving parental concealment, the first lie is told not to deceive the world, but to survive the moment. And once the lie is out, it becomes the foundation for everything else. The Wells family's behavior fits that mold: passive, vague, controlled exposure. They never held a press conference. They never made a joint emotional plea. They gave interviews separately, carefully, and with strikingly similar talking points. Even in their most public moments, something was missing. When Don appeared on YouTube channels, his focus was rarely on finding Summer. It was on defending himself. He spoke of how people misunderstood him, how the media twisted his words, how neighbors judged him. It was a pattern of deflection, not desperation. Candace, meanwhile, retreated further into silence. She avoided eye contact, interviews, and any situation where details might need to be repeated. It's that combination, one person talking too much, the other too little, that often signals coordination. Investigators call it parallel evasion. Two individuals avoiding contradictions not by telling the same story, but by never fully telling any story at all. Candace's quiet protects Dawn. Dawn's confidence shields Candace. Together, they create a wall that nothing can penetrate. But walls crack with time. 4 years later, with TBI returning to the property, that wall is being tested again. The focus on the shed isn't just about finding evidence, it's about re-examining behavior. Why did Dawn go there first? Why did neither of them demand a renewed search in that area earlier? Why, after years of theories, have they remained comfortable in silence? The truth may be simple but unbearable. If Summer died accidentally and was hidden nearby, the lie that followed wasn't meant to fool the police. It was meant to fool themselves. Because if you admit what happened, even after years, you lose everything. Family, reputation, faith, the image of being a victim. But silence is not safety, it's pressure. And pressure always breaks. 4 years later, the search has come full circle. TBI's quiet return to the Wells property isn't routine, it's recalibration. Investigators rarely go back unless something shifts. A new lead, a reinterpreted clue, or a new technology capable of seeing what old searches missed. This time, they're not chasing rumors of a red truck or mysterious strangers. They're looking at geography, timing, and silence. The shed near Beach Creek Road is more than just an outbuilding now. It's the heart of a question. Could Summer have been hidden just feet from where everyone searched? For investigators, the answer may lie beneath the surface, literally. Ground-penetrating radar, soil probes, and scent reanalysis are being deployed across a small perimeter. The work is slow, methodical, almost surgical. No one is talking to the press, and that's telling. When law enforcement moves without publicity, it means they're not exploring a theory. They're confirming one. Why this location? Because the pattern fits. The shed sits low, masked by vegetation, shielded from road and house alike. If someone needed to conceal something quickly, whether a body, clothing, or an item carrying scent, this would have been ideal. The terrain dips just enough to block the view from the upper driveway. In the fading light of a Tennessee summer evening, a person could move unseen. It's not only physical evidence they're chasing now, it's behavioral reconstruction. Agents are re-interviewing people connected to the Wells family, mapping who was where, who had vehicles, and who might have helped. Because statistically, concealment doesn't happen alone. When something is hidden successfully and stays hidden, someone usually assists. Sometimes knowingly, sometimes not. That brings us to the third-party theory. In many child disappearance cases, the unknowing helper plays a crucial role. They might lend a car, move a bag, agree to a favor without realizing what they're part of. The Wells family had connections, neighbors, relatives, local acquaintances. Some had records, some didn't. In a rural area like Ben Hill, favors are currency. A person could show up, stay for 10 minutes, leave, and no one would think twice. If that happened between 4:30 and 6:30 p.m., there'd be no witnesses, no cameras, and no trace. Candace's mother, often referred to as Grandis, was reportedly present that day. Yet, like so much else in this case, her exact movements remain blurred. She rarely speaks publicly and has never clarified where she was in those missing hours. If she was near the shed or saw something unusual, she hasn't said. Whether that silence is fear, guilt, or simple exhaustion, no one knows. But it isn't just the family's silence that shapes this mystery. It's the community's. In small rural areas, gossip spreads fast, but confessions spread slow. People hear things, sense things, but keep quiet. Sometimes it's loyalty. Sometimes it's fear of involvement. Over time, silence becomes culture. And in that quiet, truth can rot. The TBI's return breaks that silence. Agents aren't talking, but their actions are. Revisiting the perimeter after all these years is a statement in itself. It suggests that the abduction narrative, the idea that someone drove up, took Summer, and vanished, no longer fits the evidence. Instead, the focus has shifted inward. Not who came to Ben Hill, but who never left it. Behavioral analysts are re-examining the Wells family's early responses. Why were no public searches led by the parents? Why was there no direct plea for Summer on camera? Why did Don seem preoccupied with defending himself rather than finding her? These are not minor inconsistencies. They're behavioral fingerprints. In truth, the Wells case has become a mirror for human fear. Fear of blame, fear of shame, fear of losing control. It's possible that multiple people hold small fragments of the truth, none of them enough alone to break the case, but together they could form a picture. All it takes is one person willing to talk. That's why investigators have reopened local tip lines. They're not asking for new theories, they're asking for memories. A sound, a car, a strange request, anything around that 4:30 to 6:30 window. Because sometimes what breaks a case isn't a body or a confession, it's a whisper. The shed may or may not hold answers, but it represents something larger. The idea that the truth has always been nearby, overlooked, buried beneath routine and fear. For 4 years, everyone looked outward. Now, for the first time, the investigation is looking back in, and if what they find confirms what many already suspect, that Summer never left Ben Hill, then this story isn't just about one missing girl. It's about the lengths people will go to protect a lie, and how silence, stretched over time, can become its own kind of evidence. When a child disappears, time becomes both a weapon and a wound. At first, every second feels urgent. Sirens, neighbors, search dogs, helicopters. But as days turn to weeks and years, urgency fades, replaced by an ache that never fully heals. In the Summer Wells case, that ache has been buried under rumors, online theories, and endless silence. Yet beneath all the noise lies a single truth the investigators are still chasing. What really happened between 4:30 and 6:30 p.m. on June 15, 2021? Every decision since that day has revolved around those 2 hours. The timing of the call, the gaps in the parents' stories, the unexplained movements near the perimeter, even the renewed interest in the shed, all trace back to that silent window when everything changed. Forensic experts now believe the timeline itself might have been constructed backwards, molded after the fact to hide what truly occurred. In other words, the story the world was told may have been designed not to reveal Summer's disappearance, but to conceal its cause. There's a reason the abduction theory never fit neatly. No tire tracks, no screams, no credible witnesses. The dogs lost her scent within yards of the house. Every known abductor scenario collapses under those facts. That's why TBI's renewed focus has nothing to do with strangers. It's about proximity. In child disappearance cases, statistics show that when a body is never found, the explanation usually lies closest to home. But the Wells property has always been more than just land. To locals, it represents isolation. Thick trees, steep slopes, hidden corners. A place where sound doesn't travel far and where secrets can rest undisturbed. For investigators, it's a labyrinth of possibility. A maze where one misstep during the first 24 hours could have erased the only trail that mattered. And in 2021, that's exactly what happened. The search teams came fast, but not forensic teams. The property wasn't treated as a crime scene because there was no visible evidence of one. Officers looked outward, assuming abduction, while the interior and perimeter remained largely unchecked. That early decision, understandable at the time, may have cost them the truth. Because if something was hidden near the shed, even temporarily, it could have been moved or masked before anyone thought to look again. Then there's the question of behavior. Don's decision to drive to the bottom of the property when he first arrived home. Candace's lack of clarity about where she was during the crucial hours. Grandis's disappearance from the public eye. Each of these choices forms a behavioral map that mirrors concealment rather than confusion. Not overt guilt, but selective control. A family not falling apart, but holding a fragile lie together. Why cling to silence for so long? The answer may lie in psychology more than malice. When a person causes harm, intentionally or by accident, the mind rushes to build barriers against the unbearable. Denial, justification, rationalization, they all become survival tools. Over time, the false story becomes easier to live with than the truth. "She was taken," Don once said, almost peacefully. That phrase, repeated enough, can quiet the conscience, even as it poisons the truth. Yet silence has limits. It erodes trust, isolates allies, and feeds suspicion. The Wells family's refusal to cooperate publicly, their avoidance of press and lack of emotional transparency have turned public empathy into doubt. The very silence that once protected them now defines them. They are no longer just the grieving parents. They are the center of the unanswered question. And that question is not simply, "Where is Summer?" but, "Why hasn't anyone broken?" In nearly every case involving concealment, someone eventually cracks. A friend, a relative, a helper who carried the weight too long. Time makes silence heavier. Guilt corrodes memory. One slip, one word, one confession. It's all it takes. That's why investigators remain patient. They know truth doesn't always come from evidence. Sometimes it comes from exhaustion. There's another possibility too. One more painful. That Summer's disappearance wasn't the result of an impulsive act, but a desperate choice. Some locals have whispered about a handoff, the idea that she was given to someone to avoid CPS intervention, alive at first, but lost later. It's a theory with no proof, but not impossible. In small communities, informal arrangements happen quietly. A friend agrees to watch a child, a relative takes someone away for safety. Weeks later, no one talks about it again. If something like that occurred and went wrong, it would explain the missing body, the missing panic, and the missing truth. Regardless of the theory, one fact stands. The silence around Ben Hill Road is not natural. It's constructed. Too many people know too little, and too few have tried to know more. Each interview, each vague statement, each contradiction feeds the same haunting possibility that the truth has been within reach all along, buried not by distance, but by fear. Today, the shed near Beach Creek stands as both symbol and evidence. Its peeling boards and rusted roof catch the sunlight like scars. Maybe it hides nothing. Maybe it hides everything. Either way, its presence reminds everyone watching that sometimes the smallest structures hold the heaviest truths. The TBI's new search isn't about reopening old wounds. It's about closure that never came. Whether they find remains, objects, or simply confirmation that something once was there, their return sends a message. They haven't given up, even when the family has. Because justice, no matter how delayed, depends not on time, but on persistence. If Summer never left that property, then justice was always waiting right there, just beyond the reach of a flashlight, behind a shed that everyone thought had already been checked. The tragedy then isn't just what happened to her. It's how close the truth might have been, if only someone had looked twice. As the investigation circles back to where it all began, the story of Summer Wells reminds us that silence is never neutral. It protects someone. It hides something. And for 4 long years, that silence has hung over Ben Hill like fog, dense, unbroken, and heavy with what's unsaid. Law enforcement may not speak publicly about what they're finding, but their quiet return to the shed says enough. Something there still matters. Maybe it's evidence. Maybe it's a realization that this case was never about a stranger driving up a dusty road, but about what was hidden in plain sight. For the Wells family, time may have offered distance, but not peace. Every unanswered question echoes louder, every inconsistency casts a longer shadow, And for those who know more than they've admitted, silence won't save them forever. Secrets always shift. They change weight with every sunrise. Eventually, they demand to be told. If you've followed this case, you know that Summer's name isn't just a headline, it's a promise. A promise that someone, somewhere, still cares enough to keep asking the hard questions. If you've seen something, heard something, or simply remembered a moment that didn't make sense, speak. Even a whisper can tip the balance between rumor and truth. Because justice doesn't fade when attention does. It lingers, patient and waiting, in every unspoken word and every unsearched corner. The shed may be just wood and metal. The soil may hold nothing. But truth has a way of surviving, buried, forgotten, quiet, until someone dares to dig. Summer Wells deserves more than silence. She deserves to be found. This is Crime Wisp, where the silence breaks and the truth begins to speak.